The corridor of St. Helens Regional Hospital in Portland carried the faint sting of antiseptic mixed with the damp scent of early autumn rain. My hand rested protectively over my 8-month belly as I made my way down the hall, the thermal bag pressed to my side. Inside was Colin's favorite, turkey and Swiss on sardo with that expensive mustard he always asked for. That morning, before leaving for his shift, my husband, Dr. Colin Hayes, cardiologist, had bent down, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Take care of our little miracle." For 3 long years we had lived through the cycle of hope and heartbreak, fertility treatments, disappointments, 2 devastating miscarriages that nearly broke us, and then, against all odds, a miracle. When those 2 pink lines appeared, it was Colin who cried in the middle of our kitchen, holding me tight in the golden light pouring through the windows. I believed nothing could ever shatter what we had built. I was wrong. Each heavy step echoed beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. I imagined opening his door, setting the lunch on his desk, kissing him quickly, then talking about tomorrow. About the daughter we would finally meet. The polished brass plate gleamed at the end of the hall. Dr. Colin Hayes, cardiology. My chest swelled with pride. I knocked softly. No answer. Only the faint shuffle of movement inside. Maybe he was busy, but according to his schedule, he should have been free. I turned the handle. The thermal bag slipped from my hands, thudding against the floor. Before me stood the man who had whispered, or miracle, just hours earlier. His white coat hung loose, shirt undone, his hands tangled in the fiery red hair of another woman, their mouths pressed together in a desperate, hungry kiss. Patient charts scattered across the tile floor. And the woman wasn't a stranger. Not some meaningless fling. It was Sloane Mercer, the new nursing director, the one who always smiled politely at me, but whose eyes stayed cold. My world collapsed in 30 seconds of silence, and what came after nearly killed both me and the child inside me. Portland in early fall always carries a scent all its own. That morning, the damp chill lingered over rooftops, the smell of wet earth and rain drifting through the bedroom window. I, Avery Bennett, rested my hand on my 8-month belly, listening to the steady heartbeat beneath stretched skin, and smiled softly. It was the sweetest music I'd ever known. In the kitchen, the thermal bag was ready. A turkey and Swiss sandwich on golden sourdough, spread with the fine mustard my husband loved most. I prepared it with the care of a small ritual. Colin Hayes, dedicated cardiologist, the man I'd fallen for back when I was just a student volunteer, never forgot to compliment me whenever I handed him that sandwich. "You really are my miracle," he'd say, making me believe every effort was worth it. We had endured so much to arrive at our second miracle. Baby Nova, growing inside me. 3 years of waiting, 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, countless hours spent in fertility clinics, staring blankly at closed doors. And then, at last, on a morning filled with sunlight, 2 pink lines appeared. Colin broke down crying right there in the kitchen, holding me as if the world had finally chosen to smile on us. From that moment, my entire life revolved around the child I carried. St. Helens Regional Hospital, where Colin worked, stood tall in the heart of Portland. Glass walls reflected the gray sky, its endless corridors steeped in the sharp scent of disinfectant. For me, the hospital was both a second home and the witness to our life together. It was here that I first met him. Me, a nervous psychology intern fumbling trays of water for patients, and him, a young resident who paused long enough to smile and steady me amid the chaos of the ER. His dark eyes seemed to see through my flustered shell, straight into the small pocket of courage within me. We weren't alone. My uncle, Thomas Blake, the hospital's chief operating officer, had spent his life keeping this place both humane and disciplined. He was the one who guided my first steps into medicine, and Riley, my sister, a litigator in New York, who always fought at my side, whether it was a family squabble or the heartbreak of losing a pregnancy. Fierce, blunt, sometimes sharp-tongued, but with a heart overflowing with love. And then, of course, Nova, the baby girl who had already become the center of our universe. That day, as I stepped into the hospital corridor, fluorescent lights glared off polished tile. The rubber soles of nurses' shoes tapped rhythmically, monitors beeped in steady time, and somewhere nearby, The aroma of coffee from the first floor kiosk slipped into the air of antiseptic. I walked slowly, hand-cradling my belly, imagining the moment Colin would look up from his charts, see me with his lunch, and his eyes would light the way they always did. In my mind, the picture of a perfect family was still intact: weekend picnics, children's laughter echoing through a backyard, warm dinners beneath golden light. I believed every past wound would be healed inside that vision of home. What I didn't know was that within minutes, when the office door opened, that picture would shatter into dust. The office door creaked open, the sound sharp enough to tear through the stillness at the end of the corridor. I stepped inside, the thermal bag slipping from my hand, hitting the polished tile with a heavy thud. For a heartbeat, my world stopped. There he was, the man who had kissed my forehead that very morning, whispering about our little miracle, now pressed against his desk. His white coat hung loose, shirt unbuttoned. The same hands that cradled my belly at night to feel our daughter's tiny kicks were buried in the fiery red hair of another woman, their mouths locked in a ravenous kiss as if nothing else in the world existed. Patient files, pens, medical charts littered the floor, scattered proof of a betrayal I never imagined. And the woman I knew instantly. Sloane Mercer, the newly appointed nursing director. The same woman who had lingered at our cafeteria table, smiling politely, complimenting my so-called pregnancy glow while her eyes stayed cold as steel. The woman who always found ways to wedge herself into conversations between Colin and me. Now the vague suspicion I had pushed aside was standing in front of me, breathing, undeniable. The room spun. My swollen belly pulled me down, my legs trembled, my throat closed tight. A broken sound escaped me, half sob, half strangled cry. They jerked apart. Colin spun around, face drained white before flushing red, like a boy caught in some shameful act. But Sloane was different. Calm. She smoothed her skirt, fixed her tousled hair, and then smiled. Not guilty, not ashamed. A smile of pure satisfaction. As if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Well, isn't this awkward? Sloane's voice was light, almost playful, but her eyes cut like a blade. Avery, do you know how exhausting it's been pretending to be nice to you at hospital functions? At least now, it's all out in the open. Enough, Sloane. Colin's voice dropped, but it was weak, hollow. He stood there gripping the edge of the desk, eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to meet mine. I staggered back a step. Colin, my voice cracked. Say something. Tell her to stop. Tell me it isn't true. But he said nothing, and that silence was more brutal than any confession. Sloane laughed, a dry, sharp sound brittle as breaking glass. He has nothing left to say, Avery. He hasn't loved you for years. He's pitied you. Through the miscarriages, the crying, the endless grief. And honestly, did you really think a man like Colin would stay with someone like you? Each word stabbed deeper, ice sinking into my chest. She's lying. Isn't she, Colin? I whispered, clutching my belly as if I could shield my daughter from this cruelty. But Colin didn't answer. His eyes finally met mine, filled not with love, not even with anger, only pity. And in that look I knew. Every cruel word Sloane had spoken was the truth. In that suffocating office, my world collapsed, and somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered the most terrifying truth of all. This was only the beginning of the nightmare. The air in the room grew heavy, thick enough to choke. The hum of the ceiling vent sounded strangled as I stood there, arms wrapped protectively around my belly, heart pounding wildly against my ribs. Sloane's words still echoed like shards of glass in my head. But worse than her cruelty was Colin's silence. My husband, the man I thought would protect me for life, stood frozen like a stranger in the audience, letting another woman rip my dignity apart. I staggered back toward the door, desperate to escape this toxic room. But just as my hand touched the handle, Sloane's voice cut through, sharp and mocking. Where do you think you're going, Avery? Running away. That's what you do, isn't it? Cry, whine, let someone else clean up the mess. No wonder Colin needed a real woman instead of a weak little thing like you. I turned, throat tight, forcing out the words. Move. My voice trembled but carried a thread of defiance. Sloane stepped closer, lips curling in a smirk. Or what? You gonna call your Uncle Thomas? the only shield you've got in this hospital. Don't forget, I know how to make him listen to me, too." In her cold eyes, I saw nothing but hatred. My legs wobbled under the weight of my belly, but I clenched my fists, steadying myself. "Move," I said again, louder this time. She didn't. Instead, she shoved me hard in the shoulder. My body lurched, balance gone, and I hit the floor with a brutal thud. Pain shot through my hip and tore across my abdomen. I gasped, instinctively curling around my belly as the muscles tightened in violent spasms. "Stop." The word ripped out of me, half plea, half command. But Sloane only stood above me, her expression twisted with cruel satisfaction. Through the haze of pain, a thought struck me coldsy. The herbal tea Colin had given me that morning. He'd said it would calm the Braxton Hicks contractions. But the strange taste still lingered on my tongue. A chill ran through me. What if I hadn't stumbled into this trap by accident? What if I had been prepared as prey long before walking into this room? I crawled toward the door, every movement tearing through my body. "Colin?" I croaked, voice raw. "Help me, please." He didn't move. His eyes dropped, his hands buried deep in his lab coat pockets. Not one step forward, not one hand reaching out. His indifference pierced deeper than the fall itself. Sloane crouched low, her perfume chokingly sweet as her face hovered close to mine. "Listen to me, Avery. This world has no place for dreamers like you. Colin doesn't need you anymore, and that baby might not even be his." I froze, fury surging through me even as my body trembled. "Shut your mouth," she sneered. Then, without warning, she kicked. Agony exploded through me. I screamed, the sound shattering in the sealed office, tears streaming as I curled tighter around my unborn child. "Stop!" A commanding voice thundered through the chaos. The door burst open, and there he was, Uncle Thomas, flanked by 2 nurses. His face burned crimson with rage. Eyes locked on Sloane like fire. The room erupted. The nurses dropped to their knees beside me, one pulling out a portable fetal monitor, the other steadying my shoulder. Thomas planted himself between me and Sloane, his voice booming like thunder. "You just crossed the last line, Sloane." In that moment, writhing in pain on the cold tile, I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I heard the rush of footsteps pounding down the hall just as Uncle Thomas burst in with 2 ER nurses. His gaze cut like a blade across the seen me, curled on the floor clutching my belly. Tears streaming down my face, Sloane frozen, pale but trying to mask it with false composure, and Colin, my husband, paralyzed at his desk, looking like a stranger. "Oh my God!" one of the nurses gasped, dropping to her knees beside me. She pressed a handheld Doppler probe against my abdomen. The fragile sound of a fetal heartbeat flickered through the device. Weak, but still there, clinging to life like a thread. My breath came in jagged gasps as I fought to steady myself. Thomas knelt beside me, his hand gripping my shoulder. Firm, grounding warm. "Stay calm, Avery. You and the baby are going straight to the ER. Then he looked up, his voice like icy. "Call a crash team. Now." The nurses moved instantly. One sprinted for help, the other stayed to lift me onto a gurney. I wanted to speak, to scream the rage burning inside me, but contractions clawed at my body and stole my voice. My eyes locked on Colin. He stood there, lips parting like he wanted to speak. But when Thomas's furious gaze landed on him, he dropped his head like a man stripped bare in front of a jury. "Dr. Colin Hayes. And you, Sloane Mercer." Thomas's voice cracked through the room like a gavel striking wood. "Effective immediately. Your access to the hospital system is suspended. Your ID badges are revoked. If either of you step foot in patient care areas again, security will escort you out. That's my order. Formal documentation will follow this afternoon." As Sloane stiffened, her trademark smirk gone, her face twisted in fury. She sputtered, "You can't?" Silence? Thomas cut her off, thunder in his voice. "I just witnessed physical assault against a pregnant patient inside a physician's office. This isn't personal. This is criminal, and I swear I will see it through to the end." The air thickened like concrete. I saw Sloane's face twitch, her cold mask barely holding. Colin stayed rooted, neither defending me nor denying what had unfolded. His silence screamed louder than any admission. Another contraction tore through me, and I cried out, my body folding in pain. The nurse at my side whispered urgently, "We need to get her down to the ER now. Risk of preterm labor is high." As they wheeled the gurney out, I heard Thomas's voice booming behind us. "I'll notify legal and prepare the report for the police. This will not be buried." The shrill wail of the hospital crash alarm echoed down the corridor as they pushed me through. The smell of disinfectant thickened, fluorescent lights above stabbing into my eyes. My hands clenched the gurney sheet, tears spilling not just from the pain but from the truth. The man I trusted most had left me to die in the moment I needed him most. Yet in the chaos, Thomas's voice cut through, steady, unshakable. "You're not alone, Avery. Focus on breathing. Focus on holding on. I'll handle the rest." His promise wrapped around me like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. I closed my eyes and swore to myself I will live. My child will live, and they will pay. In the days after the chaos in Colin's office, I lay in the maternity recovery ward, my body sore, my mind drifting in and out of consciousness. The steady beep of the fetal monitor and the sharp sting of disinfectant became the background music of endless days. Yet somewhere inside the fear, I knew, I was no longer alone. Uncle Thomas barely left the hospital. He ran everything with an iron hand, suspending both Colin and Sloane, sealing their offices, backing up every piece of medical documentation. He even stamped "Si infidelity" across all reports tied to me and my pregnancy so no one could ever manipulate them again. "This isn't family business anymore," he said, eyes locking on mine. "This is legal. This is ethical. And we're going all the way." That night, the door to my room burst open. A flash of red curls and a suitcase, still tagged from the airline, my sister, Avery Bennett. The moment I saw her, I broke down. She dropped her bag, rushed to my bed, and wrapped me in her arms without saying a word. "My baby sister," she whispered fiercely. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here now." Riley was more than my sister. She was a trial lawyer in New York, razor, sharp, and relentless, known for turning cases around with a single cross-examination. After hearing everything from me and Thomas, her eyes lit with a cold, steady fire. "We're not fighting this with emotions alone," she said. "We'll fight with the law, with evidence, with strategy." Before the night was over, Riley had called Nora Fields, a veteran divorce and domestic violence attorney in her 50s, calm but formidable. She was in Portland within 24 hours. Sitting beside my hospital bed, opening a thick case file, Nora made it clear I now had an army at my back. The plan was named Operation Clean Cut, cutting every toxin out at the root. Riley laid it out step by step. 1. We gather everything. Hallway footage, medical records, prescriptions, anything that proves Colin and Sloane falsified or caused harm. 2. We file for divorce immediately, with a motion for restricted contact to protect you and baby Nova. 3. We take this to the ethics board and to the police. This will not be swept under the rug. And 4. We prepare for the media. Because sooner or later, the press will smell this story. I listened, trembling but feeling strength stir inside me. Riley and Nora spoke with such certainty, every word a pillar propping up the ruins of my heart. Thomas nodded firmly, adding, "We have to bring them into the light. Not just for you, but for the patients who could become victims of their manipulation." I looked at my sister, then at my uncle, and finally placed a hand on my belly. Nova shifted faintly, reminding me she was still fighting with me. "I'll do it," I whispered. "I won't let them take everything." From that moment, I understood this wasn't just the story of a broken marriage anymore. This was a battle, for justice, for my daughter's safety, and for my own dignity. 3 days later, once I had stabilized in the recovery ward, Riley sat down at my bedside with a thick file in her hands. Her eyes were no longer just angry. They had sharpened into something colder, the look I'd seen when she stood in court, ready to dismantle an opponent. "You need to see this," she said, sliding the file toward me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a life insurance policy. My name, my supposed signature. But it wasn't mine. The date March. The exact month I found out I was pregnant with Nova, and Colin began his endless business trips. My breath caught. The policy was worth $2.5 million. The sole beneficiary, Colin Hayes. I never signed this?" I whispered. Riley nodded. I know, it's forged. And there's more. She pulled another set of documents. Clinical trial files from the hospital. My name appeared on the participant list for a phase 2I drug study. Next to it was a consent form with a signature that wasn't mine. Oh, gotta? I buried my face in my hands, the floor dropping out from under me all over again. Riley leaned closer, her voice calm but razor sharp. Do you remember that herbal tea Colin gave you? The one he said would ease the false contractions. We had the leftover sample tested. It contained traces of misoprostol, a drug that can induce labor. My head snapped up, tears blurring my vision. You mean, he?
Yes.
Riley cut me off, her jaw tight. Colin used his position as a doctor to slip that drug into your system. If you'd gone into premature labor, if there had been complications, he'd have the perfect cover, a tragic obstetric emergency, and a massive payout waiting. My body shook violently. I pressed a hand to my belly, where Nova still kicked, as if reminding me she had survived everything they tried to take from her. That was when Thomas walked in, another file in his hands. His face was grim. We'd just uncovered payments from the hospital to a supplier called Northline MedTech. Invoices for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, none of which was ever delivered. Colin approved many of them. Riley's eyes narrowed. Money laundering. Thomas nodded. And possibly tied to under the table funding for that drug trial. If that's the case, then it isn't just Colin and Sloane. It's a network using this hospital for profit and cover-ups. I couldn't speak. The scattered pieces, fake insurance, the strange tea, Colin's silence, Sloane's cruel smile, were snapping together into a terrifying picture. I hadn't just been betrayed in my marriage. I was the target of a calculated plan to kill me, dressed up as medicine and finance. Riley gripped my hand tight. Listen to me, Avery. This isn't just a divorce anymore. This is a crime. And we're not letting them walk away from it. I nodded, strength rising where fear had lived. The terror hadn't disappeared, but it was hardening into steel. I looked at Riley, at Uncle Thomas, and then placed my hand over my belly. We'll bring it all into the light. For my daughter. For Nova. In that bright hospital room, with the steady beep of the monitor filling the silence, that promise felt like a beginning. The real war had just begun. News of the incident leaked quickly through the hospital's halls, then spread like wildfire. But instead of fearing it, I saw it as an opportunity. The more people knew, the harder it would be for the truth to be buried. Riley understood this better than anyone. She began reaching out to those who might step forward as witnesses. The ordinary staff who had seen things, or who had been pulled unwillingly into Colin and Sloane's dangerous games. The first to appear was Elijah Park, a wary-eyed pharmacy tech with dark circles etched from too many night shifts. When he walked into my room, clutching a stack of printed records, his hands shook. I can't stay quiet anymore, he said, voice trembling. That night, Sloane called me to sign off on a drug release. She said it was just routine paperwork. But when I checked the system later, there were entire batches listed under Dr. Hayes' orders, except no patients had ever been prescribed them. Riley took the papers, flipping quickly through the pages, her eyes lighting with focus. This is from the official pharmacy log. Elijah nodded. I copied it before it was altered. She usually waited until after midnight, when traffic on the system was low, and entered the orders herself. I even saved hallway camera footage showing her entering and leaving the drug vault. Gratitude swelled inside me. A witness like this could shift the entire battlefield. Less than a week later, another name surfaced, Amira Khan, a clinical research coordinator. She met Riley at a small coffee shop near the hospital. I sat a few tables away, gripping a cup of herbal tea, trying to hide the nerves shaking through me. Amira placed a USB drive on the table, her voice low. I archived all the consent forms. There's a pattern. Avery, your signature appears in the electronic files, but the timestamps trace back to Sloane's login. I stayed silent because I was terrified of losing my job. But I can't anymore. For the first time in days, Riley allowed herself a thin smile. Amira, you did the right thing, and we'll protect you. Piece by piece, the puzzle snapped into focus. Colin and Sloane weren't just adulterers or liars. They had manipulated an entire medical system, forged signatures, falsified drug logs, billed for equipment that never existed. This wasn't just betrayal in a marriage. It was a chain of calculated crimes. Thomas added fuel from the finance department, dozens of invoices Colin approved, all routed to the same post office box out of state, directly tied to Northline MedTech. If we connect these dots, he said, his voice grave, we won't just drag Colin and Sloane into court. We'll expose a medical fraud network. That night, I lay in my hospital bed, Nova stirring faintly in my belly. I whispered to her, "Do you feel that, baby girl? The tide is shifting. I'm not just fighting for us anymore. I'm fighting to make sure they can't hurt anyone else." I closed my eyes and pictured the courtroom. Elijah standing there, voice trembling but steady, recounting the truth. Amira confirming the electronic signatures. Thomas mapping the money trail. And Riley, with her steel-edged voice, turning it all into a case no one could deny. In the darkness, I understood something more clearly than ever. We weren't alone anymore. The truth was being lit by ordinary people, brave enough to step out of the shadows of fear. And this was only the beginning of a much longer war, where justice itself would be the sharpest weapon we carried. When the evidence grew strong enough, Riley and Nora met with prosecutors to plan a bold move. I would meet Colin, pretending to discuss custody and the future, while secretly wearing a recording device. It was the only way to capture him admitting what he had done. The idea chilled me, but I knew it was the road I had to take. That morning, Portland was draped in heavy fog. The street leading to our old house, the place once filled with marital memories, felt foreign, even hostile. I sat in the car, hands trembling as I adjusted my coat to hide the tiny microphone clipped near my chest. Riley squeezed my shoulder, her voice steady and firm. "You're not alone. The FBI has agents stationed all around. If anything goes wrong, they'll be in immediately." I drew a deep breath, then stepped out. The red wooden door swung open the moment I knocked. Colin stood there. He looked thinner, hollow-eyed, yet he wore a smile, as if he had longed for this moment. "Avery, thank you for coming. I know you hate me, but we need to talk. If not for us, then at least for the baby." I walked inside, my heart hammering. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee, but the warmth was gone. I stayed standing. "Colin," I began, my tone calm but edged. "I just need to know one thing. Why? Why did you do all of this?" He faltered, rubbing his face. I owed money. More than you could imagine. These were people I couldn't say no to. If I didn't pay, they would have killed me, killed you. The baby. Everyone. I clenched my fists, forcing my voice to stay even. "So your solution was to cash in on your wife's life insurance, by forcing her into preterm labor, by letting your mistress attack her." His head snapped up, horror flashing across his eyes at hearing the truth spoken aloud. Then, like a man cornered, he exhaled shakily. "I just wanted it to end. I thought if it all looked natural, no one would suspect. And then, all the debt would disappear." Every word landed crisp and clear in the hidden microphone beneath my coat. Part of me felt numb, but another part sparked alive. We had him. I looked at him directly. "Colin, did you ever truly love me? Or was it always a plan?" For a fleeting moment, his eyes softened. "I did once." But then everything changed. When I met Sloane, when the money started flowing, when the debts piled up, I was weak. I chose the easy way out. My throat tightened, but I forced the words through. The easy way was killing your wife and daughter. Silence filled the room like smoke. And in that silence, Colin's expression shifted. Suspicion flared. He stepped back, his voice dropping. You're recording me, aren't you?" I didn't answer. Before I could, he lunged toward me. But the door exploded open. 4 FBI agents stormed in, their voices sharp. "FBI! Hands where we can see them!" Colin froze. Cold metal cuffs clamped around his wrists in seconds. I stumbled back, exhaling a shaky breath as one agent removed the mic from my coat, giving a satisfied nod. "We've got everything we need." As they led Colin away, he turned his head, eyes burning with icy hatred. "This isn't over. Avery." I wrapped both arms around my belly, feeling Nova kick gently as if to answer. I whispered so only my daughter could hear, "No, Colin. It is over. And from here, were just beginning. News of Colin's arrest by the FBI spread like lightning. Within hours of the transport van pulling away from our old house, Portland's media erupted with headlines. Top cardiologist under investigation for insurance fraud. Nursing director tied to clinical trial scandal. And of course, my name splashed everywhere. Pregnant wife exposes husband's murder plot. I wasn't surprised when Sloane struck back. Just 2 days later, a tabloid ran an inside source, claiming I had a history of mental instability, that I had abused anti-anxiety medication before my pregnancy. They painted a story of a wife out of control, sabotaging her marriage, then blaming Colin and Sloane. I read the article in my hospital room, hands trembling with rage, but Riley only smirked, her voice calm, sharp as glass. The oldest trick in the book. Attack the witness's credibility. We've been ready for this. That very afternoon, we held a press conference. Nora Field stood beside me, and Uncle Thomas sat just behind, his posture straight as a wall of protection. I wore a simple pale blue maternity dress, my hair tied back, my face exhausted but my gaze unwavering. When the microphones lit up, I drew a deep breath. My name is Avery Bennett. I have never, and will never, abuse medication or any substance during my pregnancy. Every piece of my medical record is clean and fully verifiable. I paused, locking eyes with the sea of reporters. The only thing I did was trust my husband, and he betrayed that trust in the most horrific way. Riley stepped in, her lawyer's precision cutting through the room. We hold irrefutable evidence. Pharmacy logs, security footage, forged insurance contracts, and, most damning of all, a recorded confession. Any attempt to smear Avery only reveals the desperation of the other side. By the next morning, the tide had shifted. Newspapers and networks ran our evidence. Certified reports proving the signatures were forged, toxicology screens showing no trace of narcotics, and even security footage of Sloane slipping into the pharmacy vault at midnight. Public opinion swung hard in my favor. But media wasn't just headlines. It was the roar of social networks. Hashtags like #FafJusticeForAvery and a Protect Babinova spread across Twitter and Facebook. Women who had survived domestic abuse began sharing my story as a symbol of courage. I scrolled through messages from strangers. Stay strong. We're with you. Of course, there were still cruel comments, skeptics who insisted I was fabricating this for revenge. But this time I didn't tremble. I had learned something vital: the truth doesn't need embellishment. With evidence and the courage to speak it, truth shines on its own. Sloane, however, wasn't finished. A leaked video from a private staff party showed her laughing, dismissing me as a weak little girl riding on her family's coattails. But the clip only backfired. The public saw her arrogance, her cold indifference, and outrage grew louder. Calls for a full-scale investigation flooded in. I sat in my hospital room, Nova fluttering gently beneath my skin, and realized something: the legal battle had begun, yes. But the battle for public opinion was just as critical. Because in the end, the court of public conscience can be the sharpest mirror of truth. And this time, I would not let anyone twist my story. The morning the trial began, Portland's sky was heavy and gray, clouds pressing low over the county courthouse, as if the weight of justice itself hovered above. I walked in, clutching a file to my chest, my rounded belly a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. Riley moved beside me, her gaze sharp as a blade, and just behind us was Uncle Thomas, his face set like stone, both family and fortress. Across the aisle, Colin appeared in an expensive suit, his hair slicked back. But the hollows under his eyes betrayed him. His jaw was tight, his expression brittle. Beside him sat a small army of high-priced attorneys, the same faces I'd seen plastered on billboards across the city. And there was Sloane, pale beneath layers of makeup, fatigue hiding under her mask of defiance. Yet when her eyes met mine, hatred flared like a spark, reminding me this wasn't just a legal battle, but a war of wills. The prosecutor's voice cut clean through the murmurs of the courtroom. This is not a case of mere infidelity. This is a systematic scheme: insurance fraud, forged signatures, illegal clinical trials, and attempted murder. A ripple of shock swept through the gallery. My heartbeat pounded, but beneath it rose a steady surge of strength. At last, the truth had stepped into the light. Witnesses were called one by one. Elijah Park shuffled to the stand, clutching pharmacy logs in his trembling hands. At first his voice cracked, but soon it steadied, laying bare how Sloane manipulated the system to smuggle out drugs. The documents he produced left the jury stunned. Then came Amira Khan, holding a USB drive. She clicked through the files, pointing out consent forms digitally signed under Sloane's login. Her voice was unwavering. "I'm not afraid anymore. If I stay silent, there will be more Avery's." Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back, keeping my gaze steady on the jury box. The hardest blow came when the FBI presented its findings, a trail of fraudulent invoices from Northline MedTech. Millions laundered through the hospital with Colin's approving signature, linked directly to his personal accounts. Then, the special agent revealed the most damning piece: a recorded call between Colin and a local crime figure. Colin's voice filled the courtroom. "If this goes smoothly, the insurance will pay out, you'll get your cut." The courtroom erupted. Colin's lawyer scrambled, arguing he was coerced by debt, forced into desperate choices. But the prosecutor silenced them with one sentence: "Debt does not give a man the right to drug his pregnant wife and conspire to kill his unborn child." When it was my turn, silence fell thick as stone. I spoke from the beginning. The turkey sandwich, the herbal tea, Colin's empty eyes as I begged him for help, the brutal kick from Sloane. My voice trembled, but every word carried weight. I didn't need embellishment. The truth itself was stronger than any defense. When I finished, Riley squeezed my hand. "You did good?" she whispered. By the end of deliberation, the verdict thundered down Colin Hayes, guilty of attempted murder, insurance fraud, money laundering, and falsifying medical records. Sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, no early parole. Sloane Mercer, guilty of assault, research fraud, and conspiracy, 15 years behind bars. But perhaps most important of all, the court ordered a sweeping investigation into Northline MedTech and its government allies. A white-collar medical scandal was unraveling, one that would save not only me, but countless innocent patients from future harm. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the Portland air was sharp and cold. The sky remained gray, but inside me a new light was burning bright. Justice had found its voice. After the trial, life did not instantly return to the peace I had once dreamed of. Justice had been served, yes, but the scars, both on my body and deep within my soul, still throbbed like wounds refusing to close. There were nights I would jolt awake at the sound of Portland's wind rattling the windows, my hand instinctively clutching the emptiness of my stomach, only to remember Nova was safe, breathing softly in her crib beside me. Often, I would rise just to listen to her tiny breaths. That fragile rhythm was like a lullaby, a reminder that all the pain had not destroyed us. Nova herself was proof of resilience, a child who endured so much even in the womb, who kicked, who fought, and who came into this world fierce and unbroken. Uncle Thomas became my anchor more than ever. Each morning he stopped by my temporary apartment, carrying hot coffee and the day's paper. He didn't drown me in platitudes. He simply sat across the kitchen table, his presence solid, immovable. "It's okay to be weak sometimes, Avery," he told me once. "But remember, being weak is not the same as giving up." Riley stayed for weeks. At night, after we tucked Nova into sleep, the two of us would sit on the small porch wrapped in heavy blankets, sipping hot tea against the chill. I poured out the weight I carried. The betrayal, the ache of being broken by the man I thought would protect me forever. Riley listened without interruption. Sometimes she just took my hand and squeezed it. "Forgiveness is your choice," she said, "but forgetting, that's not required. Holding on to memory can be its own kind of power. Your safeguard against ever letting it happen again." In time, I joined therapy groups for survivors of domestic violence. At first, I struggled to speak, words catching in my throat, but as I listened to other women share stories of hidden bruises, years of cruelty dressed as love, I realized I wasn't alone. My pain was part of something larger, a chorus of women fighting to be seen, heard, and safe. With the settlement funds from the hospital's insurance, I founded a small nonprofit, Nova's Light. Its mission was simple: offer legal aid and trauma counseling for women and single mothers trapped in cycles of abuse. On the day we cut the ribbon for our first office, I carried Nova in my arms. She laughed, her dark eyes sparkling, as though she knew the world was changing. I whispered into her tiny ear, "You are the reason I'm still standing." Stronger than ever. Someone once asked me, if you had the chance, would you erase everything that happened? I thought for a long moment, then shook my head. The loss, the betrayal, the pain. They had forged me into who I am now. Not flawless, but steadfast. Without the darkness, I might never have understood the full weight of the light. And that light is no longer just for me. It shines now for every woman still clawing her way out of her nightmare. Proof that survival can be transformed into strength, and strength into hope. 2 years have passed since everything fell apart, and Portland feels different now. So do I. I am no longer the trembling woman who once staggered down that hospital corridor. Nova has grown strong, her cheeks rosy, her smile mischievous, her deep dark eyes reflecting the resilience I know she carried even before she was born. Each morning, when she runs into my arms and calls me, Mama, I'm reminded that every wound can heal, even if the scar remains forever. Nova's light has grown beyond anything I once imagined. What started as a handful of rooms for legal aid and counseling has become a full-fledged center where dozens of women now find safety. Some days I walk into the reception area and see a young mother clutching her child, eyes swollen from tears but holding divorce papers tightly in her hands, and I see my own reflection in her. She is no longer alone. She no longer has to be silent. Riley often teases, "You didn't just escape a toxic marriage. You turned it into a movement." But I know this isn't about revenge. Justice in court was enough. What I want now is to pass on strength so that no woman has to endure the terror I lived through. Once, a reporter asked me, "What's the greatest lesson you've learned from all of this?" I paused for a long time before answering. That the deepest betrayals don't kill us, they forge us. Real strength isn't about never falling, it's about standing back up after you've been broken. We can't control what others do, but we can choose the next chapter of our own story. I also learned that forgiveness is not always necessary. I don't forgive Colin or Sloane. They will face the law and their own conscience. But I have let go of hatred, because I refuse to give them any more power over my life. That, too, is a kind of freedom. Nova is still too young to understand, but one day she will hear this story, not to feel fear, but to feel pride. I will tell her that even before she was born, she fought and survived, that her very existence gave me the reason to climb out of the abyss. And I will teach her this. Our worth is not measured by perfection, but by how we face adversity. On an autumn evening, when Portland once again smells of rain, I hold Nova at the window of the Nova's Light Center. The streetlights glow across her face, her eyes shimmering in the golden haze. I whisper, "You are my greatest legacy. And this foundation, these stories, the women we've helped, all of it began with you." And deep in my heart, I carry one certainty. The journey from betrayal to justice, from pain to healing, will live on. Not as a scar, but as a beacon, lighting the way for those still lost in the dark.